that anyone ran those polls because they hadn't run them for a couple of months, but I wasn't surprised at the level because that's what we thought. There is something going on in this race, and that is this. 60% of people in the first couple of states don't know who they're voting for.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very, very much up in the air. And we're just starting to get down to the point where people have to make up their mind, like, we have to beat Trump now, who can do it? And, this is going to be the most emotional, highest turnout presidential election in the lives of anyone in this room. It's going to be. And we're going to tell by the turnout. They're going to believe that if they lose this election, they're going to lose every election going forward because they can no longer cheat. And they're right.
That's right.
And they're going to think this election is for everything. And we're going to think that if we lose this election, it could be the end of justice in America, and it might just be the end of the world. And we're right. So people are going to really care. So let me just get through what I've got to get through so we can take as many questions as possible, because this is where we are. Look, I know everybody has heard me described as being rich and a billionaire. That's how every time I'm introduced, people say that. So let me tell you who I really think I am, because that's not how I think of myself. My mom was a teacher in New York public schools. And she taught prisoners in the Brooklyn House of Detention. My dad was the first generation in his family to go to college. He went to college, he went to law school, he quit the law to go in the Navy in World War II. He's a naval officer. And then, because he had a law degree and he got very high grades in law school, they made him the assistant to the chief prosecutor of the Nazi war criminals in Nuremberg. Yes. So that's actually who my family is. They were people, Depression era, World War II babies, who thought your job is to give back as much to the United States as the United States has given to you. That's what they taught my two big brothers and me. And my dad also told us, if you see something wrong in your country, that's at the heart of the country, you make sure you fight it. You make sure you fight it early and as hard as you can. And he said that because he'd ended up prosecuting Nazi war criminals, and they didn't stand up and fight it. And that's why I did need to impeach. You see something rotten at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, something really wrong, you fight it. So let me say this. I have a simple reason for running. I believe the government's broken. I believe it's been bought by corporations. I've spent 10 years, I started a business, I ran the business, I took it from nothing to a big international business, then I walked away, took the giving pledge to give the bulk of my money away to good causes while I'm alive. And I've spent 10 years putting together coalitions of ordinary American citizens, just like the people in this room, to take on what I think of as unchecked corporate power. And for 10 years, we've been winning. I've taken on oil companies, on clean energy. When, you can run propositions in California, where I'm from. No one wanted to fight the oil companies because everybody knew they're too rich, they're too mean, you're gonna spend a ton of money and they're gonna kill you. So in this fight, there was no one else who wanted to do it, because the last person who took him on spent $72 million of his own dollars and got creamed. So it's kind of, if you're stupid enough to do it, you can do it. We got 70% of the vote. We killed the oil companies. I took on the tobacco companies, had won 17 times in a row, got them to pay their fair share, $3 to $4 billion a year of taxes that went to Medi-Cal, which is healthcare for the lowest income Californians. I passed clean energy legislation around the United States in purple states to show that people will vote for clean energy, 50% clean energy by 2030. I've worked to stop pipelines like the Keystone Pipeline, stop fossil fuel power plants, end cash bail. Yes. Stop automatic sentencing. We've been winning for a decade. I also started one of the largest grassroots organizations in the United States, Next Gen America, which is, in 2018, Next Gen did the largest, we're in North Carolina, we've been here for 5 years, on the ground, going to colleges, community colleges, HBCUs, big universities. In 2018, we did the largest youth voter mobilization in American history. We went into 38 Republican districts. We more than doubled the turnout of young people in those 38 districts. 33 flipped from Republican to Democrat.
Wow.
That's when you look, what I believe in. Look, this is, to me, I have a very different view of how we win. I don't want to say we're going to convince the 2% of moderate Republicans that we're just like Republicans, but a little bit nicer. I want to convince the 50% of people who don't vote that we're not at all like Republicans, that we actually stand for what's right, we're going to fight for it, and if we all turn out, we win everything. That's my goal. So let me say this. I'm for term limits. I'm for structural change. 12-year term limits for Congress people and senators. Because if you want bold change, you need new and different people in charge. So let me say, I like to say the 6-word argument for term limits: Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Chuck Grassley. Just so you know, I am also for direct democracy. I believe we should be allowed to pass our own laws. If Congress won't do it, 90% of Americans want mandatory background checks on every gun purchase. 70% of NRA members want that. We can't get it because the gun manufacturers actually own the Congress. Yeah. We can't even get it brought up in the Senate. If we had direct democracy, if we could vote in our own laws, we would get mandatory background checks on every gun purchase next week. So, look, to be clear, I'm an outsider. You know the old saying, no turkey has ever voted for Thanksgiving? Well, no one in Washington, D.C. wants to talk about the things I want to talk about in terms of take the power in the country and give it back to the American people. Don't leave it in Washington, D.C. That's what I'm actually talking about. So let me say 2 more things and then I'll take questions. One is, you should know, I'm the only person in this race who will say that climate is his or her #1 priority. And look, I've been working on this for 12 years. I've done a lot on this successfully. And I've always started with environmental justice. When you talk about, I call my plan a justice-based climate plan.
Okay.
Start with the people who can't breathe without getting asthma. And if they turn on their taps, they're going to get sick.
Exactly.
Start with those people in those communities. Solve those problems, you'll get climate right.
Yep.
So I'm a justice-based. Second thing, this is the biggest job creation program in American history. Rebuild America, millions of good-paying union jobs everywhere. That's what climate solution is actually about. A huge job program. And the last thing I'll say is this. We can't solve climate inside the borders of the United States. It's global climate change. So when we think about the United States and who we are the only country that can lead on this morally, financially, technologically, and commercially. There is no second choice for us in saving the world. So when we think about climate, it means we have to rebuild. I declare a state of emergency on day 1 on climate. We have to rebuild this country on an emergency basis. But we also have to go back to reimagining the United States being the country that stands for things and leads the world morally. And you know something? We've gotten away from that under Mr. Trump. I don't know if you've noticed. But it's terrible for us. This is a country that is supposed to stand for freedom, justice, equality, and prosperity, and we've gone away from all of it. And so if we can use climate and the biggest challenge in the history of the world, to reinvent who we are and what we stand for. And you know something? That's a good thing. That's a reason for America to exist, and it's a reason for us all to get up in the morning. We have to together go save the world. That's great for America as far as I'm concerned. I want to say one more thing. I want to talk about the economy for 1 second. So obviously Mr. Trump is going to run on the economy if they don't throw him out. And we know that because he's already told us. He said to a bunch of Americans at the American-Israeli conference, he literally had a bunch of people in a room just like this, and he said, "You don't like me, and I don't like you, but you're all going to vote for me because if the Democrats get in, they're going to destroy the economy in 15 minutes."
He said that, yeah.
So let me just say, this is how he's running. Let me reinterpret that statement for you. This is actually his campaign. I'm a criminal. You guys know that. And I despise 80% of you. I've made that clear. And you despise me. You've made that clear. And if I showed up in Raleigh, North Carolina, your mother would never let me in the front door, and she would certainly not let me sit down and have dinner with your family.
Yeah.
Okay, and by the way, my mother would have rather burned the house down than let him have dinner with us. But you're all gonna vote for me because the Democrats are a bunch of socialists who don't understand growth or job creation or business, and you can't afford that. So you know what? You hate me, and I hate you, but you're voting for me. That's his campaign. So let me say this. I actually built a business. I actually have spent 30 years studying what makes a business work, what makes a country actually be prosperous. I can point out without any fear that he's a fake business person. He played a business person on a reality TV show. Reality TV actually is not reality. He's a fake. He's a con man. And the other thing that's been true is he's done a terrible job as a steward of the American economy. That tax plan is the worst. Yes. I almost can't imagine as bad a piece of economic legislation. Over $1 trillion giveaway to the richest Americans and the biggest corporations. It's a huge deficit exploder, and you know we're going to solve that deficit on the backs of working Americans. That is the worst piece of legislation. And his other big genius idea, the trade war, is a complete and utter failure. You know, they just did the analysis. I've been saying this for a year.
Yeah.
They just did the analysis. It's hurting American workers.
Yep.
It's hurting American consumers. And it's crushing American farmers, including here in North Carolina. So someone's got to get on a stage. I mean, just think forward to September and October. This guy is good on stage. He took 16. Well, he's not going to convince the people in this room. But we're going to have to take him down on the economy.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to go, look, I can go toe to toe with this guy on the economy. I'm not worried about who knows more about the economy. He's a fake. He's always been a fake. And you've got to point that out. He's good against, he took 16 Republican conventional politicians in the 2016 primaries. Do you remember that? He made nicknames up about them. He bullied the heck out of them, and they folded. And honestly, Mrs. Clinton was the most prepared Democratic candidate in history. She was a first lady, a senator, secretary of state. She's encyclopedic on policy. She's a truly smart woman, totally prepared, and somehow he was stalking her on the stage. Do you remember that? Worked. That cannot happen. We're going to have to beat him on the stage. I can do that. And I'm telling you, I'd love to do it. I live for that. Okay. So I said what I really like to do is have a conversation and take questions. So I hope there are people here with mics. And when they come around, please say your name so everybody can know who you are.
Thank you for your attendance. Let me share what my...
And what's your name, sir?
My name is John Esparza from here in the Wake Forest, North Carolina.
Okay.
My personal concern is a president whose fidelity to the Constitution is not there, whose loyalty to our country is not there. When you finally have the opportunity to talk to his mob boss that we call Vladimir Putin, what's the first thing you're going to say, Mr. Putin? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Putin? So let me say
Why does
this.
he even have
Look,
to turn
you guys,
around?
one thing, and John, that I really think is true is we're not going to beat Mr. Trump because he's a crook, because we all know he's a crook, and the
right.
Republicans know he's a crook too. And we're not going to beat him because he's, unhinged, because that's common knowledge. We're going to beat him because he's incompetent, that he's bad for the American people. What he's saying about the economy is baloney. He is an incompetent president on the economy, and we can see over the last 2 weeks, if you couldn't pick it up in the first 3 years, that he is an incompetent president on foreign policy. He really has no strategy. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he's making us less safe. And that's how we're going to beat him, because he actually stinks at his job.
I think it's me. Every single person in this room. Oh, I'm David Freeman.
Nice to meet you, David.
Not Alamance County. A little rattled. But anyway, every single person in this room is either living with a disability or is one illness or one accident from having a serious disability. Yet disability rights are almost never addressed in the general campaign. This is a real problem, and I'm hoping that when you're on the stage, that you will find an opportunity. If they don't ask you, if you'll find an opportunity to bring up, for example, the Disability Integration Act. So many people with disabilities are losing their liberty because they're being institutionalized. I'd really appreciate it if you brought focus to disabilities.
So Dave, let me say one thing about disabilities. Look, it starts with the Individuals with Disability Education Act being fully funded. That's well designed at a federal level. That is the Medicaid for employed individuals with disabilities, so that people with disabilities can work full-time and be taken care of. There really is a question in our society in terms of health care. There are huge areas like people with disabilities that are overlooked. And the other, so I definitely agree with you. The other one that I think is dramatically overlooked and underfunded is mental health.
Yep.
You go around this country and you realize people are suffering in terms of mental health. It is dramatically underfunded. As I like to say, mental health is health.
Yep.
If you go to the doctor with a broken leg, they never say, come back in 2 months and I'll set your leg. But if you go in with a mental health issue, they do say that. And they're reducing spending across this country in terms of mental health facilities. I've said I'd spend an extra $100 billion a year on mental health. It's a huge issue, under-discussed and under-resourced in the United States. And I'd also spend another $75 billion on the opioid crisis. People are suffering in the United States of America. Honestly, I've been traveling the country for 7 years full-time. I mean, now I'm running for president, so I'm still doing it. But I was doing it as an activist and an organizer for 7 years. And I can tell you, my takeaway and what I tell my kids is to go out and see people are suffering needlessly so that they can cut taxes for the richest people in the biggest corporations. And the suffering and the pain is intense. I saw it today, but I see it virtually every single day in talking to Americans, what they're undergoing unnecessarily, David.
That's right.
We have the money to solve these things. We're choosing to give it back to rich people in terms of lower tax rates.
Ms. Steyer, first I'd like to thank you for for coming to Raleigh. My name is Angela Bridgman.
Angela, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And this is something which is hardly ever discussed in the actual debates, other than the GLAD debate, but as a member of the transgender community, as the first vice chair of the transgender political caucus of the North Carolina Democratic Party, the first such caucus formed in the United States, I might add. What will you do about LGBTQ equality? Because Donald Trump told us 2 weeks after the Pulse massacre, which was the worst day of my life, 2 weeks after, he told us that he would be the most pro-LGBTQ president ever. Does anyone remember that? Because I do.
That was one of 15,000 lies.
And it's been a nightmare for so many in my community. And you talk about people that are left behind and who are brutalized in the economy. The transgender, even more so than the LGB elements of our community, are so absolutely marginalized and victimized in our economy.
Angela, can I answer you?
Enough is not being done.
So let me add on to something that Angela said. So the person who runs the largest LGBTQ organization in my home state of California is a college classmate, and so he's been a friend of mine for 40 years. And he does a large fundraiser every year, one in LA and one in San Francisco, and he always asks me to come, and sometimes I speak. I've been supporting his organization, Equality California, for years. And he always gets a young transgender person to come and talk. Between about 16 and 18 years old, they tend to be extremely sophisticated. They've done a lot of public speaking, so it's not like they're intimidated in a crowd of 2,000 people. Now, I remember years ago going and listening to probably an 18-year-old girl say that half of the transgender people under 21 try to kill themselves. And I said, okay, that is dispositive for me. That is a degree of suffering that nobody can fake and that nobody can deny. And anyone who walks by someone in that much pain and just casually punches them in the face, it has a heart of stone. So when I think about it, you should know, in my hometown of San Francisco, 10% of the homeless people are transgender under 21. That is a ridiculously high percentage because they've left home somewhere else to come to San Francisco, and now they're on the street with all the attendant fears, worries, and problems. So I believe the LGBTQ community, I get rid of the transgender ban on the first day just as a statement, but I believe in a lot of this country, you can be fired for being in the LGBTQ community. You can be fired, no questions asked and no recourse. You can be thrown out of your housing for that. People are not protected. It's not a protected class in terms of having rights and protections, which is extremely unjust and unfair. So you're asking me what I do. Look, I'm from San Francisco, California. I'm not wondering about this. 30% of the people on our campaign are members of the LGBTQ community. I am a strong believer in protecting people's rights in the United States of America. And whether it's race or gender or ethnicity or sexual orientation, as far as I'm concerned, the United States started, we're an experiment in freedom and equality. It started with ridiculous injustice and cruelty. And as far as I'm concerned, the success of America is the progress since then, including towards this community. And that's why I so fight Mr. Trump's racism and his sexism and his homophobia. He says it, he vilifies people, it's absolutely wrong. We have to call it out, because to let what he says stand and let his actions stand implies that we're going along with it. And I'm not. And that's why I said, I don't want to meet in the middle. We're going to be half racist. We're going to be cruel on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but not on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. No, there's something wrong here. Look, I'm saying turn the page. We made a horrible 40-year mistake with this radical right-wing experiment to give all the money to rich people and big corporations and to go after the rights of American citizens. Failed experiment, turn the page, let's win everything.
My name is Omega Wilson with the West End Revitalization Association in Mebane, Alamance, Orange County. I'm here with my wife representing our organization, Environmental Justice Organization, Rights-Based Communities
Nice
Organization.
to meet you, Omega.
Good to meet you too. Specifically, I received a letter in admitting communication directly with Senator Tammy Duckworth, Democrat from Chicago, Illinois, veteran, to write an environmental justice report and its causes and impacts for local communities. And we have a lot of data, a lot of information related to what's happening to us in Mebane. And we've been working on this issue for 25 years. They wanted a written report from a national environmental justice voice. I've served on a lot of environmental justice issues in programs and things all the way from Bush to Obama, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We want to send that report to you. One of the things I was kind of disappointed about, I could not find a snail mail address for you.
I'll give you one before the night is out, okay?
We want to get you the hard copy. It's pretty detailed, pretty significant, based on 25 years of work we've been doing here. It's going to be sent to several committees, Democratic committees in Congress. 16 senators signed this request of me and some of the national EJ leaders, and it will be shared on a larger scale, including, as you might expect, all the people, Democrats who are running. All right. I want you to have a hard copy. They will have a hard copy, and we do not expect it to get lost in the campaign dustbin. We want a response. We want a written response. We don't want a card. We don't want a card in the mail. We don't want to say thank you for coming to the campaign. We want a documented look at this data, which is part of your key campaign thing, including environmental and climate justice. We want a real response based on not general stuff, but what is going on in our community and the central part of North Carolina. Can we get that?
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to respond to that. So let me say this. People in the United States, or at least the media in the United States, has a deep misunderstanding of who is actually an environmentalist.
Right.
You know, I think that if you were
I would
to
say too.
ask the media who's an environmentalist, they would say a well-educated white person driving a Prius.
That's right.
That's sort of the image. You know, it's a little unfair. It's a two-dimensional stereotype, but that's what they'd say. Actually, the way environmentalism works in the United States, and that's climate, or pollution, or clean energy, or just the environment generally, starts with Latinos.
Well,
Latinos, African Americans, Asians.
yeah.
So when you want to know who the actual environmentalists are, who vote on it, who fight for it,
Yep.
that's actually where everybody agrees. So when I talk about environmental justice, that's actually the community that I've worked with on climate. You know, when we do stuff in California, the people who lead in the legislature represent the poorest zip codes in California, literally. And their names are things like Eduardo Garcia, Cristina Garcia, Kevin De Leon. I've been down in South Carolina, in Orangeburg, with a guy named Harold Mitchell,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
a fantastic guy. Ask him
Yep.
how involved I've been.
We know him very well.
He's a great. I've been down in Denmark, South Carolina, to see their water problems with
Yep.
Deanna Barry. And I always ask people, who do you think lives in Flint, Michigan? Who lives in Denmark, South Carolina? Who lives in Newark, New Jersey?
Come on.
Who lives in the spine of California where 1 million people can't drink the water safely? It's environmental. This is an environmental justice issue. That's where I start. And so to me, look, I call it a justice-based climate plan because that's where we start, and that's the leadership we're looking for. Because if we get that right, we'll get everything else right. If we get that wrong, we'll get everything else wrong.
Yes, I'm concerned about the money in politics, and I know that you are as well. And one of the big problems is that, my name is Joseph Huberman. One of the big problems is that the Supreme Court has said that reducing the amount of money that corporations can give is a First Amendment problem. And I want to see some way to get around that and make it work.
So, I think what Joseph is talking about is the famous Citizens United decision. And the thesis is, look, let me say this. I read a book called The 20 Worst Decisions of the Supreme Court. And it goes back to, the very founding of the United States. And they've made some decisions that would be funny how bad they were if they didn't affect human beings so cruelly. And, going right back to the time when slavery was legal, they made some decisions around that. That's, shameful to go back and read. And honestly, Citizens United would be the 21st really terrible decision they made.
Right.
Basically, corporations are people and have a right to spend as much political money as they want. Otherwise, you're abridging a human being's right to speak. Obviously, corporations are not people. Like, come on, that's ridiculous. But this radical right-wing Supreme Court has said that it is. So what can we do about it? Let me say this. Mitch McConnell rigged the Supreme Court. He refused to allow President Obama's pick to the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland, to be considered. One of the things that's true about the Supreme Court, it is not in the Constitution that there are 9 justices of the Supreme Court. We can change that and increase that number. And I would do that. And look, because I want to address Joe's question more broadly, which is this. There has been dramatic, consistent cheating in politics by the Republican Party. It is the only way they can win. But let me say this. I was looking at the numbers in North Carolina. There are 2.5 million registered Democrats in North Carolina. There are 2 million registered Republicans. They have a 10-3 advantage in terms of congressional representation with many fewer registered voters. Are you kidding me? I know just what it's called. Fancy word, gerrymandering. Actual world, cheating.
Yeah, right.
I hate the fancy words.
That's right.
Let's face the other thing that has been going on. Look, they systematically strike people off the rolls and suppress votes by African Americans in huge size. And given what it's taken for people to get that vote, specifically African Americans, to disallow that vote and take away the basic right of citizenship that took hundreds of years to get, I would go after that with the Justice Department. I think if you get in a room and conspire to take away votes from American citizens, and specifically African Americans, it's a crime. And that's how I treat it. There's something wrong about that. So that's why this is going to be, look, Democrats have tried to be polite to Republicans, and I don't know why.
Too long.
I'm struck dumb. It's kind of, we think it's bad to tell the truth about someone doing something bad.
Exactly.
No, it's bad to do the bad thing, not to call it out.
Exactly.
And so,
that's what I
look,
keep saying.
I am not in the appease Republicans camp. I mean, tell the truth about what's going on camp and get the American people to throw them out. That's my goal.
My name is Latasha Gibson, and
Latasha, you have a prepared question.
It's not going to take too long. My name is Latasha Gibson. I'm a part of the AUS movement, and I know that your platform is about the environment and transitioning to a green energy economy. But one of the biggest concerns that I have is the prospects of blacks being shut out of the green energy economy, just like the IT industry. And just to give a context, my background's in energy and engineering, and I would like to do work in concentrated solar power, but I'm transitioning to business consulting because I don't see a pathway for me. And the thing is, when you look at the engineering field, you have a lot of things working against AUS blacks. You've got discrimination, you've got the abuse of the OPT and H-1B program where they bring in cheap labor to extend their bottom line. And it's not just in the industry, but you also have exclusion from research, exclusion from startup funding. non-compete clauses in the industry and disclosure agreements to where engineers, they can't work for another company in that same industry. And, you know, as somebody working in the Department of Energy, I've seen they had the DARPA program where they sink millions into these high-risk research, with a lot of them actually failing. And someone like me, as a black in energy research, can't even get 6 figures, you know, to do modeling or any type of research to see whether something's technical feasible. And one thing that angers me about the government is that they keep saying that there's no blacks or people in engineering.
Exactly.
And we have statistics or studies that show that college graduates, black college graduates, have about the same unemployment rate as a white high school dropout.
That's right.
And when you look at, okay, where's the money going to, it's mostly going to Silicon Valley or MIT, where you have most of the research for solar energy storage. And these are the areas where you see the worst form of homeless. So to me, you know, it's not just about inequality, but it seems to be a deeply immoral issue, because you have business executives telling engineers who invest years of experience in, you know, their education and training, that your degree, your experience is nothing more than a commodity and can be easily replaced by somebody cheaper. But you have, you know, blacks and women having to jump all of these, you know, this red tape just to be able to get into the field. So, you know, my question is, what kind of policies are you going to have so that blacks can be in green energy, aside from just throwing money at HBCU, because that seems
I
to be
did
the
do that.
solution to everything.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you a 3-part answer, Natasha. I'm gonna give you a 3-part answer, and you can sit down, you don't need to, listen, you don't need to stand up for this. First of all, I wanna tell you what I've done. This specifically relates to this, which is my wife and I started a community bank 14 years ago. We actually started it in 2005, so almost 15 years ago. And the point of the bank was to try and deal with some of the issues that you're talking about. It's a mission-driven bank. It's dedicated to economic justice, environmental sustainability, and supporting businesses owned by women and people of color. That's the point of the bank. And we set it up because we basically said the financial system is exactly what you're saying. They don't support women. They don't support people of color in starting businesses, in doing research. So where they've redlined, we will greenline. That we will go to the places and bring money. I'm totally for living wage. I could talk to you a long time about how working people have gotten screwed in a 40-year fight with the Republican Party breaking unions. But this is different. This is about putting people in charge, giving them autonomy, changing who's running things. And so over the 15 years, we've gone from $0 to over $1.1 billion. We measure every single loan on impact to the community and to our goals. It's completely mission driven. We'll never get the money back legally. We can make more loans or we can give the money away. But the whole point is actually to address the economic injustice that exists now and has existed since the very beginning. So let me just say, I was not running for president 15 years ago. I did this because I knew there was something wrong, and I was trying to address it and show that it can be addressed, that you can be profitable and do the right thing, and the financial system is deeply prejudiced and unjust. So that's my first point. Second point, I am throwing money at the HBCUs. Just so you know, I came out with a plan to put $125 billion into the HBCUs over 10 years because I think they're so important. They're a historically important lifeline for African American young people who are legally precluded from going to the mainline schools. They produced more than half the black engineers,
Right.
and doctors,
Yes.
and teachers. It's been a huge success, actually. And judges and generals, and they've lost 42% of their federal funding over the last 10 years. That means that the tuitions are high, the kids are coming out with a lot of student debt, and yet these are incredibly successful critical institutions in society that historically not only have done the job, but also are critical parts of the communities where they're located. So you can say, don't just throw money at the HBCUs, but I'm going to do that. And the last thing I just want to talk for a second about race.
Please.
Because I'm a believer in honest talk about race. And I believe that policy comes out of narrative. So if we're going to get the right policies, we're going to have to start telling the true story of the last 401 years.
Yep.
And what does that look like?
Yep.
So I would institute a formal commission on race on the first day of my presidency. And I would do it on a solution-oriented basis, just so you know. I'm for reparations. You know, no one else will say this who's running for president. I'm for reparations. But I want to say, the reason I want to retell the story is partly, look, people in the South may know this story, but I can tell you, people in California, where I'm from, do not know what Jim Crow was. There is a story that needs to be told about 401 years, but it's not just about injustice. Of course, it is about injustice, but it's also about contribution. It's people and community, the African American community, that has built this country and has also been the moral leadership consistently in this country for generations and centuries. And out of narrative comes policy. So if we tell the true story, we'll come up with the just policy. And it's got to be solution-oriented. But I'll tell you something that really shocked me. I went to Berlin. I hadn't been to Berlin. It's a really exciting city, believe it or not. And they have something like the Washington Mall. They have a big square, and they have the equivalent of Congress here, and the President's House here, and all the most important government buildings in one square. And 2 blocks away, there's a memorial to the victims of the Holocaust with an apology. And I thought, okay, they managed to tell the truth about something they did that was deeply wrong. We can do that too. We need to tell the story and make an apology for something that happened. It happened. We all know it. And I know it's funny. I was saying this to an African-American guy who's on our staff. He said, Tom, it's awkward for me to talk about this too. I said, okay, I know that, Malik. But you know something? If we talk about it and it's awkward and uncomfortable, we can also move past it and solve it. And that's the only way we can actually be the country we want to be.
Good evening, Mr. Steyer. My name is Jeanette Augenbaugh. I have no affiliations with any organization or policy or politics because I got married at 20, had 5 kids by the time I was 25, and was widowed at 26. So I was a little busy for the past 20 years.
I bet.
My first 2 children served in the Navy. I am incredibly grateful that my son just got out November 3rd before this mess started, because that mango madman is an idiot. And I grew up in New Jersey. I was in high school while he was turning Atlantic City into a cesspool.
You were down there when he was blowing up all those casinos.
And I was watching all this and sitting back and thinking, not old enough to vote yet, still considered a child, but I'm watching what he's doing, and all I could think is, why is this being allowed to happen? And that's when I began to understand corruption. That's when I began to understand money talks, BS walks. And I'm now watching this man trying to start World War III to deflect attention from the impeachment process. How his overall bigotry in whatever form is what has run his life, and he's just a flat out bully. But what I want to know is how things affect my life. After getting my children where I did, because I did for them what my parents did for me, which was very difficult in the late 60s and early 70s. I wasn't told what to think. I was taught how to think for myself. And I passed that on to my 5 kids, who are now adults. And it seemed to me that was my contribution to try to straighten this mess out. Because if you have people that can look you in the eye and say, yep, I messed up. What do you need from me to fix this? Well, here's what I need from you, sir. A bunch of health problems that I didn't realize I had in the past 6 months have basically kicked me in the ass. And Mr. Trump is looking to eliminate a lot of disability support. And there have been issues with corporations interfering in healthcare, particularly for women. I mean, who the hell do these people think they are to tell us what we can and cannot do with our own bodies? That is a kind of particular abuse that just cannot stand. And I want to know what you're going to do about it. And please, God help me, don't pull a Ross Perot. Don't get us all excited and wound up that there's somebody who wants to stand up for us. And in the first moment, it gets just a little bit rough. Tuck your tail between your legs and run home. Because that's how we ended up with the first Bush.
Oh, Lord.
That's the first time I've ever been compared to Ross Perot. But what Jeanette is saying, actually to me, is what I was trying to say less well before. And that's this. When I go around the United States of America, I see people who are suffering. And you're saying basically the president is trying to take away the healthcare support that you need to have a decent life. Yes. And that's what, we use fancy words. But I'm telling you, there's nothing fancy about being sick and dying. Nothing fancy about it. There's nothing fancy about a first grader who's in a school that doesn't let him or her learn to read and move ahead in the world. There's nothing fancy. It's just cruelty to kids. And so we talk about these, government programs. But it's really, are we going to be organized and deliver money to help people with disabilities? Are we going to let disadvantaged kids go hungry or not? That's not complicated. A hungry kid.
Feed them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not complicated. The idea that if you let poor kids go to schools that don't have enough money for them, you're legislating inequality for the next generation. It's not complicated. They keep trying to act like, we need to talk in fancy words, but it's just cruelty for money. That's all I'm seeing.
It's part of your
Yes.
to help those kids.
So, listen, you guys, I, as a result of impeachment, went around and did 50 town halls in the country. And I did a bunch of them in states that we don't organize in, bright red states.
Yeah.
Because we normally organize in places where we think we might win. So if, we go to Utah, we don't think we don't spend a lot of time at NextGen in Utah. We don't spend a lot of time in Oklahoma. But for need to impeach, I went all over the country and I did town halls. And that meant I talked to people I didn't just go and do a town hall and fly out. I'd go for a few days and talk to people and learn about the state and get the facts. The Republicans have an economic plan. They do it in every single state. Mr. Trump may seem like an outlier. He's an absolute dyed-in-the-wool Republican. Here's their
That's
plan.
right.
It's easy to understand. They cut taxes on rich people and big corporations every single time. That's their first move. They've done it here, by the way. They always do it. The second move is to cut education spending, K through 12 and higher ed.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's insane. It's incredibly counterproductive. It's cruel. It's unjust, but they always do it. They cut health. First they make sure they don't have any money, and they say we don't have any money, so we can't take care of you. The third thing they do is, the fourth thing they do is they always allow pollution.
Yep.
I don't even like pollution. I like the word poison. It's like you can poison these people if it makes you richer.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, you can kill me so you can be richer? Really? That's an amazing idea. And then the last thing they do economically is they always attack unions, the rights of working people, and organized labor. Always. That's their plan. And think about Mr. Trump. That's his plan. Right down the whole way. So in answer, I am against every single part of this. Look, I'm for undoing the tax giveaways to the richest Americans and the biggest corporations that have gone on. I'm for a wealth tax. I've been in a wealth tax for almost a year and a half. Long before I thought about running for president, I was like, something really wrong is here. We have redistributed the money in this country to the richest Americans. Like, how could that be fair or smart or just or anything?
He who dies with the most toys wins.
That is, I heard that, and it's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. I know people say it. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
That's their mindset.
I know. The other thing you should know is I am for taxing passive investment income to people at the same rate as earned income. That creates so much money. If we do that, we can give a 10% tax cut to 95% of Americans and have money left over. Why should I pay a lower tax rate on passive investment income, me, than somebody who gets up at 7 o'clock in the morning and goes to work until 5 o'clock at night? Why do I pay a lower tax rate? Like, somebody just made that up one time and it's stuck. There is no justification that I can see for that other than political power. And that's not good enough because it's unfair. So an answer to your question is, I would undo all this stuff. I would go back to a progressive tax system. I would tax wealth because we have to. Something huge and unjust has happened, and it's big. You know, if you look at what's happened since 1980, all of the increased income in this country has gone to the richest Americans. It's overwhelming. And that fact, I'll just give you one last thing on this because obviously I could go way too long. The minimum wage in the United States is $7.25.
Whoa.
If you took the minimum wage in 1980, when Ronald Reagan was elected, and just inflation adjusted it, so there's no rise in the minimum wage, it's just the same amount but in $20, it would be $11. If you then included the productivity gains of American workers, like we're way more productive than we were 40 years ago. And traditionally those productivity gains have been split between employers and working people. That's the traditional American way. The minimum wage would be $22. Can you imagine what this society would be like if you made $22 at the minimum? It would actually be fair society. That is, you know, it's $7.25. Something has gone on over the last 40 years. That's why I keep saying, I don't want to compromise. I want to turn the page. It's like, okay, you said it would trickle down. False. It's never trickled down. You said that if we lowered your tax rates, we would raise more money. False. Not true. You said unions were bad for working people. That's illogical. False. We need to make a change. That's really what I'm talking about. We need to turn the page on a failed economic experiment.
We have time for one more question.
This is so cool.
Wow.
I'm Carly. I'm the president of College Democrats at Elon University. And I'm also an incoming master's candidate at Duke. And the reason that I bring this up is because I'm a first-generation college student. So all of this that I'm doing for myself and for my family, it requires a lot of student loans. And the price of college is unaffordable, so I was curious your thoughts on that. And I know that these are private schools that I go to, but still, it's a lot, and I can't afford it. So I was curious your opinion on that. Yeah.
So let's talk for a second about student debt. And let's step back for a second and remember that everyone who's taking on student debt is doing what their family asked them to do since they were 2. Get educated, be a better citizen, be more productive, make the country better off. So it's not a selfish thing. It's something, that's what every parent says to their kids. Do a good job, be productive, get educated. 44 million people have student debt in the United States. Half of them have delayed getting married because of it, and half of them have delayed having a baby because of it. So when we know about how much it hurts a lot. So what would I do? College has to be affordable. In California, and I'm for this, we get 2 years of free college. I would make the interest rate on the debt 1%.
Yep.
And I'll tell you why that's a big deal. At 1%, the average student debt is somewhere around $35,000 in North Carolina, just so you know, coming out. You pay back $35,000 at 1%.
Right.
If it's 6%, which is the average rate of the debt that's held at the government level, then that $35,000 doubles every 11 years. If you don't pay it back in 11 years, you're going to pay it back $70,000. And the debt that's held by banks has an average interest rate of 10%. That means it doubles every 7 years.
Right.
You're not going to be paying back 35 grand. You're going to be paying back multiples. So the first thing is 2 years of free college. The second is 1% interest rate. And the third is this. If you take your education and do something that's community or country service, so you're in the military, or you're a teacher, or you're a nurse, or you're a social worker, then you get 10 years and they cancel the debt. So it doesn't, this is something that I absolutely believe in. But let me talk for 1 second, Carly, about how I put this in the context of education. So let me say this. My mom was a teacher in public schools and in prison. And my brother has been an advocate for at-risk kids his whole life. The number one correlation with success in our society is your reading aptitude level in 2nd and 3rd grade.
Exactly.
So when I look at what we need to do, we have to, am I for universal pre-K? It's like the single best investment we can make as a country.
Yes.
My brother always said to me, if you don't get them by 3, it may be too late, and if you don't get them by 5, it's definitely too late. And so, from my standpoint, the importance that I put on early education, you can't be more serious about it than I am. It seems to me the single best investment we can make. And the other thing that I would think is a great investment is putting money into the schools in low-income districts where the property taxes are low and therefore there isn't enough money for the kids. Because otherwise, you are legislating inequality. And if you think there's not a racial element to this, then you're not being accurate or thoughtful or true. And I want to say one other thing. We spend $720 billion a year on defense at the federal level. We spend less than $70 billion a year on the federal level on education. Think about that. So when you think about every time we spend more on defense, that's money that we could be spending on our kids. You think about the $1 trillion we've spent in Afghanistan. That is money we could be spending on our kids. When you think on the couple of $1 trillion we spent in Iraq, that is money we could be spending on our kids. So do I realize as Commander-in-Chief, the number one job is to make sure Americans are safe? Sure I do. But have those wars really helped us and made us more safe in some way that I don't understand? And there's this sense in Washington, D.C. that's like, that's just the way it is, Tom. That's just how we do it. Well, all I can tell you is if you want to know what makes a prosperous, successful country, if you don't think that investing in young kids in a fair way across society makes a prosperous, safe, successful country, then I disagree with you completely. And so when I think about what we're doing in the United States, I want every kid to be able to afford to go to college. I do. I also know there are a lot of people who aren't going to go to college because they want some kind of skilled work. And I'm someone who climbs, we're talking millions of skilled labor jobs in unions that are well paid. I want this country to go back to seeing success as success of the American people individually and collectively. And if it isn't shared, it ain't success. And that's a completely different, that's why Mr. Trump doesn't know anything. If the country grows and 1% gets all the money, that is not success. If we don't invest in our kids and they don't have the ability to live up to their potential, that is not success for them or for us. So when we think about what is prosperity, it is American people succeeding, building their capability, being healthy, getting the support they need to live their lives. That is a successful country. We are doing the exact opposite.
Yep.
I know I'm going to stick around. I know they're going to throw me out of here. This is my favorite thing to do. Can you tell that? The most important thing I can do, in my opinion, is have a conversation, listen to what people say, Jeanette, hear people's attitudes, understand where they're coming from. Look, I played team sports my whole life. It doesn't matter, it's only important to me, but I was the captain of my college soccer. And I relate to people in my life as teammates and equals. That's how I actually, when I work with people, I want to be a partner and a teammate. When I look at the country, when I look at you, I don't see a hierarchical relationship. I want to be teammates. And I have a very simple rule with teammates, which is no one kicks my teammates in the face. I'm not wondering how I feel about this. Jeanette was saying, you were saying, how seriously do you take it? Look, I think about this. I travel around the United States and I see unnecessary suffering of people on my team. I literally, when I was talking about transgender people, my attitude is no one walks by a transgender person in the United States and kicks them in the face. No one can be cruel in my mind to Americans or discriminate without me feeling like that's my teammate. I will not permit it. I am not partially in this. I'm not sort of for this. I'm not 99% for that. That is a 100% pledge. That as far as I'm concerned, it has to stop now. And so that is why I'm running for president. I need you guys then. I need you guys to give me a chance to make that fight for you. I promise you, I was with a lady today in the McDougal Housing Project.
Oh.
Okay, so this lady's crying. And she lost a 5-week-old baby to sudden infant death syndrome, which I don't even believe in. And her cousin had lost a 5-week-old baby to sudden infant death syndrome. And her 18-year-old son had been shot to death.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she's crying. I'm holding her. And I said, I promise you, I will do everything. I'm not 99% for you. I'm 100%. We're going to turn this page. I promise you, but you got to help me do it. And that's what I'm saying to you guys. I promise you 100% that I work on this, that I'm not compromised, I'm not conflicted. I love my teammates. That's what being a teammate is. You love the person, and you don't let anyone kick them in the face.